Yes, very excited to be here today. So I'm Iresha Jayasinghe, and I'm a current PhD candidate at The Ohio State University, and I'm studying environmental social sciences, and the study that I'm going to share today is part of my dissertation research. Next, please. I'm an international student myself. So with my interest to connection with nature, when I was looking at literature, I saw this huge gap in insights from international students. And I felt like we were not included in the studies, basically because international students currently have like 5.6% of the enrollment rates in the US, and it keeps increasing. And thinking about myself as an international student, I remembered myself engaging with nature in my home country and how I had some cultural affiliations as well with nature. So I was curious to know how international students are facing, how they are feeling, whether they're feeling the same things as I am, which led me to this study. Next slide. So in this study, I was curious to know about four main things. The first thing was I was interested to know whether Asian international college students had a certain cultural connection with nature and how they engage with nature in their home countries. The reason I chose Asian college students is even within the international community, they have the highest enrollment rates in the US currently. And secondly, I was interested to know how their connection to nature might have changed because now they are in the US, which is a foreign country to them. Thirdly, I was curious to know what barriers they're facing for engagement. And finally, I was interested to see what their recommendations are, which they provide themselves to enhance their engagement with nature. Next, please. Um, so to do this study, I used a qualitative approach, and I interviewed 30 Asian college students using semi-structured interviews. And as you can see, most of the students who participated, 64% were from India, followed by students from China and Sri Lanka. So I had students representing 7 different countries. Next slide. So this is the most exciting part. So as I said before, I was curious to know how they engage with nature in their home countries and whether there are any cultural connections to these like their behavior towards nature. So interestingly, all 30 students I interviewed shared how they had some cultural connection to nature in their home countries. Some of these categories include some festivals they had back in their home countries and traditions, such as festivals to thank nature, to celebrate harvesting, transitioning of the sun. And then they also shared how they worship nature and parts of nature. And they also told me how some of their religions are closely connected with nature and how some gods resemble animals. So they have this inherent respect towards animals because the god takes the form of an animal. And they also shared how in day-to-day lives in their home countries with their family, they use a lot of nature parts and plant parts as purifiers in spices and in rituals, as well as like herbal medicine. And they also shared some insights on how they were taught from a very young age to respect and admire nature, which also comes from their ancient literature, such as poems and books. Next, please. So these are some of the direct quotes from the participants themselves about their connection to nature back home. So an Indian student shared how they have a harvest festival called Lori, and how they sacrifice some of the crop at the end of harvesting as a way of thanking nature. And a Chinese student shared how Taoism very clearly mentions how it's important to live harmoniously with the environment. And a Sri Lankan student, which is my home country, they shared how the bo tree is considered sacred and is worshipped because there's a belief that Lord Buddha attained nirvana under the bo tree. So as you can see from these direct quotes and from what I shared before, there's a clear connection in these Asian college students with their home countries and how this is close, their connection to nature is closely connected with some cultural aspects as well. Next slide. So then I was interested to see how their connection might have changed now in the US because they're in a foreign country and they're obviously missing those cultural elements they had back in their home countries. So students shared how they still take time to connect with nature by taking walks, growing plants, hiking, and doing other things, and how they feel very positive when they're outside in nature and how they use nature as an avenue to relieve stress and anxiety. But sadly, they also shared how they miss some of the cultural connections, such as traditions, festivals, and in general, the feeling of being in the community and engaging in these nature related things back in their home country that is not currently present to them. Next slide. So I was also curious, connecting everything together to see what barriers these students are facing because they're already in a disadvantageous place because they're away from their family, friends, and community, and they don't have those traditional connections anymore. So these are some of the barriers the students shared, and the larger ones are the ones that have been more frequently mentioned. Time was a barrier mentioned, and accessibility was mentioned several times because some of these students don't have a car and public transportation is hard. And then weather, because they are not accustomed to cold weather coming from tropical countries, some of these students. And then safety concerns, racism, and lack of resources in general, and not knowing where to engage and where to go was a commonly shared one as well. Next, please. So then I asked themselves what they would like to see more from universities to help their engagement. And these are the various recommendations they provided. And some of the common ones include trips, like frequent trips, not just like one or two, but frequent free trips and events organized by the universities, which are free for students so that they also feel safe in that space. And another common thing that they shared was how they would like to have a common website or like a newsletter with all the on-campus and off-campus resources and opportunities that they can engage with. And also free things, because students like free things, and especially international students are financially already burdened. So like free gift cards, free plants, free food would be a good incentive, according to them, to increase the engagement. Next slide. So to wrap up everything, it's clear that these students have cultural connections to nature, which they are clearly missing in the US. And on top of that, they have other barriers that they're facing. So I feel it's very important that we conduct more studies with these student groups, especially because they are currently very, very overlooked in literature. So with that, I would like to wrap up. Next slide. I would like to thank the Sustainability Institute of the Ohio State University for funding the study and for participants for their time and insights, and special thanks to my advisor, Dr. Christy Lakes, lab members Lily and Keely for their constant feedback and insights. Thank you so much.